I'm Emily Carter, 30 years old, standing frozen in my own hallway. After 10 years of complete silence, my parents just walked into my beach house in Malibu, the one they thought they'd rented for their exclusive family reunion. Of course, I hadn't been invited. The look on my father's face when he realized I owned this place was something I'll never forget. My mother dropped her designer purse, her perfectly composed mask cracking for the first time in a decade. The last time I saw them, I was barely 20, walking away with nothing but $800 and a camera while they told me I was dead to them. I didn't yell when they appeared in my doorway today. I didn't have to. Before I tell you what happened next, drop a comment letting me know where you're reading from. Would you have kept your cool if you were standing face to face with the people who erased you from their lives? Hit like and subscribe if you've ever had to rebuild yourself after someone tried to break you. Growing up as the middle child in the Carter family meant existing in a perpetual state of not quite enough. My father, Edward, a commercial real estate developer with old Chicago money, and my mother, Margaret, from an equally distinguished Southern family, had crafted their lives like one of their renovation projects, meticulously designed for appearance rather than comfort. My older brother, William, followed the expected path. Ivy League education, law degree, partnership at a prestigious firm by 28. My younger sister, Sophie, married the son of one of my father's business associates before she even finished college, securing her place in our family's social circle with a 4-carat diamond and a country club membership. Then there was me. From the time I was 7, I carried a camera everywhere, not the expensive kind, just a plastic disposable my grandmother gave me. I took pictures of everything, the way light hit the breakfast table, how shadows fell across our manicured lawn, the secret smile our housekeeper Rosa had when she thought no one was watching. Photography is a hobby. Emily, my mother would say, carefully realigning the pillows I disturbed on the couch. It's not a career for someone of your background. By 16, I'd saved enough from birthdays and babysitting to buy my first real camera. I spent every free moment learning techniques from library books and online tutorials, hiding my passion like other teenagers might hide cigarettes or alcohol. You need to focus on something practical. My father insisted during my junior year of high school. Business, perhaps. You've always had a head for numbers. I did have a talent for mathematics, but only because it helped me understand camera settings better. The relationships between aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. Still, I compromised. I applied to the business program at the University of Southern California, USC, and they were satisfied. What they didn't know was that I also enrolled in photography electives, sneaking off to the art building between economics lectures. For 4 years, I lived a double life. The dutiful daughter pursuing a sensible degree while nurturing my true passion in stolen hours. Graduation day came. We sat at a luxurious restaurant in Beverly Hills, crystal glasses reflecting the soft lighting. I had planned this moment carefully. With an internship offer from a prestigious advertising firm in hand, a position my father had helped secure, I felt I finally had enough leverage to tell the truth. I've decided to pursue photography professionally, I announced after the appetizers were cleared. I've been accepted into a renowned mentorship program. The silence that followed was absolute. My mother's smile remained fixed, but her eyes turned to ice. My father simply looked at me as if I'd suddenly started speaking a language he couldn't understand. "Don't be ridiculous," he finally said. "You're starting at the law firm next month. It's all arranged." What followed was a calculated dismantling of my dreams, delivered in the measured tones my parents reserved for business negotiations. Photography was unpredictable, financially unstable, beneath our family's station. They cited statistics about failed artists, about wasted potential. "If you pursue this," My father said finally, "You do so without our support, financial or otherwise." My mother added, "You'll come to your senses eventually." 2 days later, I packed everything I could fit into my old Honda Civic, mostly clothes and camera equipment. My bank account held the remains of my graduation money, $800. Not enough for a security deposit on an apartment, barely enough for a few weeks in a hostel. William watched me pack, leaning against my bedroom doorframe. "They'll get over it," he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. Sophie didn't even come upstairs to say goodbye. That first year was brutal. I rented a room in a cramped Santa Monica apartment with 3 roommates. During the day, I worked as a barista. Evenings, I waited tables. Nights and weekends, I built my portfolio, photographing anything that might get me noticed. Urban landscapes, events for friends of friends who couldn't afford real photographers, profile pictures for people's dating apps. The first Christmas away from home, I called my parents' number. The line rang and rang. No answer, no voicemail. I tried again on New Year's, then my birthday, then Easter. Eventually, I stopped trying. William sent occasional texts that first year. Happy birthday, Merry Christmas. He even met me for coffee once, uncomfortable and checking his watch every few minutes. "They just need time," he said, not meeting my eyes. "You know how they are about the family image." By the second year, even those messages stopped. I saw on social media that Sophie had her first child. No one told me I'd become an aunt. I learned about my grandmother's death through an online obituary. My name wasn't mentioned among the surviving family members. The silence wasn't just absence. It was erasure, as if I'd never existed. My big break came through sheer desperation. A popular wedding photographer needed an emergency assistant when his regular person called in sick. The pay was minimal, $100 for 12 hours of work, but I needed every dollar. I showed up early, stayed late, and anticipated what he needed before he asked. "You've done this before," he commented as we packed up equipment at 2 a.m. "Mum." "No," I admitted, "but I want to learn." His name was Nathan Brooks, and he took me under his wing, not out of charity, as Nathan wasn't the charitable type, but because he recognized a hunger in me that matched his own. Within 6 months, I was his second shooter at high-end weddings, learning not just photography techniques but the business side, contracts, client management, marketing, real estate. He told me one day, reviewing my portfolio, "That's where the consistent money is. Weddings are seasonal. People buy houses year-round." Nathan connected me with a realtor friend who needed photos for a modest listing. The commission was small, but I approached it like it was a spread for Architectural Digest. The realtor was impressed and referred me to colleagues. Within months, I was specializing in real estate photography, developing a reputation for making even modest properties look their absolute best. 2 years into my new career, I landed my first luxury property, a $4.2 million penthouse overlooking Beverly Hills. The owner, Clara Thompson, was there during the shoot, watching me work with quiet interest. "You see angles others miss," she commented. "You find beauty in unexpected places." Clara was 68, a widow who had built a publishing empire from scratch. She hired me for several of her properties, then recommended me to friends. Soon, I was photographing homes for some of the wealthiest families in Beverly Hills. When Clara was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, she asked me to document her favorite homes for a personal project. We traveled to her properties across the country, a mountain lodge in Lake Tahoe, a villa in Napa Valley, and her favorite, a stunning beach house in Malibu. "My children hate this place," She confided as we walked along the private stretch of beach. Too remote, they say. Too much upkeep. Clara died 6 months later. I attended her funeral, standing at the back of a packed cathedral. Her children, all in their 40s, looked appropriately somber but eager for the reception to begin. None of them recognized me. 3 weeks later, I received a call from Clara's attorney. "Mrs. Thompson left you something," he said. I expected perhaps a piece of jewelry or a camera from her collection. Instead, the attorney slid a deed across his desk. "The Malibu property," he explained. "She left it to you, along with a maintenance fund to cover property taxes and upkeep for 5 years. I stared at the paper, unable to comprehend. "There must be a mistake." I managed. "No mistake," he replied, handing me an envelope. Clara's letter was brief but clear. "Emily, you understand beauty in a way my family never has. This house deserves someone who appreciates it. Make it your own, but more importantly, make it work for you. I built my life turning passions into profit. Now it's your turn." The beach house became both my home and headquarters. I converted the guest house into a studio, offering exclusive photo sessions for wealthy clients vacationing in Malibu. I expanded my business, hiring assistants and taking on commercial clients. Coastal Vision Photography grew from a one-woman operation to a sought-after brand in luxury real estate marketing. By 28, I had 6 employees, a client list that included celebrities and business moguls, and enough savings to purchase a small apartment in Beverly Hills. My work had been featured in Architectural Digest, Elle Decor, and Malibu magazine. I had built a life my parents couldn't have imagined, successful on my own terms, financially stable, creatively fulfilled. I had close friends, a small circle of trusted colleagues, and a few romantic relationships. Though none lasted long, something in me remained guarded, walled off. Sometimes, alone in the beach house at night, I'd look at old family photos, the few I'd managed to take with me. The 5 of us at Williams Law School graduation, Sophie's sweet 16 party, my parents on their 25th anniversary, arms around each other, perfectly coordinated in summer whites. Success had healed many wounds, but not the one that mattered most. I had lost my family, and despite everything, there were moments when that loss still felt unbearable. An Instagram notification caught me off guard. William Carter, 87, had posted for the first time in a while. I rarely checked my brother's social media. The carefully curated images of his perfect family life only reminded me of my exclusion. But something made me tap the notification. The photo showed my parents standing on a beach, arms around each other, squinting slightly in the bright sunshine. The caption read, "Looking forward to our family reunion next month in Malibu. Mom and Dad's 40th anniversary deserves a special celebration." I froze, staring at the familiar coastline behind them. That wasn't just any beach. It was my beach. The private stretch behind Clara's house. My house. Further investigation revealed the truth. My family had rented my beach house through an agency that managed luxury properties when owners were away. The agency handled everything anonymously. Clients never knew who owned the properties. My first instinct was to cancel the reservation immediately. I called my property manager, Angela. "They've paid in full," she said. "Non-refundable. It would be highly unusual to cancel without cause. The cause is that they're my estranged family who haven't spoken to me in a decade." I replied. A long pause. "That's complicated." Angela finally said, "Legally, we can cancel, but it might create problems. They could leave negative reviews, dispute the charges." I thanked her and said I'd think about it. For days, I wrestled with the decision. Part of me wanted to avoid the confrontation entirely, Schedule a business trip? Let them enjoy their reunion without ever knowing whose house they'd occupied. Then I saw my mother's post on her rarely updated Facebook page. Looking forward to our humble family gathering in Malibu. Nothing extravagant. Just quality time with the people who matter most. Something inside me hardened. Humble? The house rented for $15,000 a week in peak season, and the people who matter most clearly didn't include me. I made my decision. I wouldn't cancel their reservation, but I wouldn't hide either. This was my house, my life, my success. For once, I wouldn't be the one who disappeared. The week before their arrival, I prepared meticulously. I upgraded the security system, adding cameras in the public areas of the house, living room, kitchen, deck. Not to spy, I told myself, but for security. Still, I found myself watching the footage the day they arrived. My father came first, inspecting the property with critical eyes, running his hand along the marble countertops as if checking for dust. My mother followed, directing the placement of luggage with military precision. William arrived with his wife and their 2 children, a boy and girl I'd never met. Sophie and her husband came with their 3 kids. Various aunts, uncles, and cousins trickled in throughout the afternoon. Through the cameras, I watched them explore what they thought was a random luxury rental. I watched my mother rearrange the flowers I'd placed in the living room. I watched my father examine the art on the walls, pieces I'd carefully selected over years. The most painful moment came when they set up family photos on the console table. Decades of Carter family history from which I'd been systematically removed. There I was in a group shot from a ski trip until my mother noticeably shifted that frame behind another. The message couldn't have been clearer. I remained unmentionable, my existence a footnote better forgotten. That evening, I listened to their dinner conversation through the security system, feeling like a ghost haunting my own home. They discussed William's recent promotion, Sophie's children's private school achievements, my parents' upcoming Mediterranean cruise. Not once was my name mentioned. Only my cousin Lily, now a teenager though she'd been just a child when I left, brought me up. "Whatever happened to Emily?" she asked during a lull. She used to take the best pictures at family gatherings. The silence that followed was immediate and heavy. "That's not an appropriate dinner topic." "Lily," my mother finally said. "I'm just asking." Lily persisted. "She was always nice to me. Your cousin made her choices." My father responded. "We don't need to discuss it further." Lily looked like she wanted to argue but fell silent under her mother Catherine's warning glance. I turned off the monitor, my hands shaking. 10 years of absence, and I'd been reduced to an unsuitable dinner topic. A choice made, a chapter closed. I poured myself a glass of wine and walked down to the beach, watching the lights from my house. My house. Reflect on the dark water. Tomorrow, I decided, tomorrow, I'll walk through that door and reclaim my place. Not in their family, perhaps, but in my own story. I chose my outfit carefully the next morning. A simple but expensive black dress, subtle jewelry, hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail, professional, successful, unmistakably in control. I waited until they'd all be gathered for lunch on the deck, a meal my housekeeper had prepared before discreetly leaving for the day. The sound of my heels on the hardwood floors announced my arrival before I appeared in the doorway. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. 12 pairs of eyes turned toward me, expressions ranging from confusion to shock. My mother was the first to recognize me. The crystal wine glass she'd been holding slipped from her fingers, shattering on the deck. My father half rose from his chair, his face draining of color so rapidly I momentarily worried about his health. "Emily," William whispered. as if saying my name too loudly might make me disappear. I smiled, the professional smile I'd perfected for difficult clients. "Hello, everyone. I hope you're enjoying your stay." Sophie recovered first, her eyes narrowing. "What are you doing here? How did you get in?" "I live here," I replied simply. "This is my house." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the children sensed the tension, stopping their play to stare at the unfamiliar aunt who'd materialized like a character from a story they'd never been told. "That's impossible," my father finally said, his voice hoarse. "We rented this property through Malibu Luxury Estates." "Yes, you did," I replied. "They manage the property when I'm traveling for work. I decided not to go away this week after all." My mother sank slowly back into her chair. "You own this house?" The question contained multitudes. How could you afford this? What have you been doing all these years? How did this happen without our knowledge? Before I could answer, a small figure detached from the group and rushed toward me. "Emily!" My cousin Lily threw her arms around my waist. "I knew you'd come back someday." Her genuine delight cracked my carefully constructed composure. I hugged her back, surprised at the emotion tightening my throat. "Look how grown up you are," I managed, stepping back to see her properly. The gap-toothed 7-year-old I remembered had become a confident teenager with an artist's observant eyes. This unexpected warmth seemed to thaw the frozen tableau. Various relatives approached cautiously. Aunt Evelyn kissed my cheek. Uncle Henry shook my hand awkwardly. Cousins waved from a safe distance, clearly unsure of the protocol for greeting the family pariah. My parents remained seated, my mother's knuckles white around her replacement wine glass, my father's expression unreadable behind his studied neutrality. William approached next, his handshake turning into a stiff, half-hug. "You look great, Em," he said, his voice thick with something that might have been guilt. Sophie stayed by her husband's side, her arm linked protectively through his as if I might somehow threaten their perfect union. "Well," I said, addressing the group, "I didn't mean to interrupt your lunch. Please continue. Join us," Aunt Evelyn suggested immediately. "There's plenty of food." I noticed my mother's slight flinch at this invitation, an outsider being welcome to her carefully orchestrated family event. For a moment, I considered declining, retreating to my studio to let them process my existence. But something kept me anchored in place. This was my home, my territory. For once, they would be the ones adjusting to my presence, not the other way around. "Thank you," I said. "I'd like that." The meal that followed was an exercise in strained politeness. Conversation flowed in safe channels. The weather, the beach, compliments on the house. No one quite looked me in the eye except Lily, who peppered me with questions about photography until her mother shushed her. "Actually," I said, "I'd be happy to answer Lily's questions. Photography is my career. After all, my company specializes in architectural and real estate imagery." "Real estate photography," my father repeated, speaking directly to me for the first time. "That's how you afford this place?" The implication was clear. My chosen career couldn't possibly support this lifestyle. "Partly," I replied evenly. "Coastal Vision Photography has been quite successful. We handle luxury properties throughout the West Coast, with a client list that includes several celebrities and business leaders." I paused, then added, "But this particular house was left to me by a mentor. A woman who believed in my talent when others didn't." My mother flinched slightly but maintained her composure. "How fortunate for you?" "Yes," I agreed, meeting her gaze steadily. It was. The afternoon progressed in this manner: careful questions, measured responses, Moments of almost normal conversation interrupted by sudden awkward silences. The children, bored by adult tension they didn't understand, eventually drifted away to play on the beach. By evening, we had established an uneasy truce. I showed them which areas of the house were private, my studio, my bedroom, and which they were welcome to use. I answered basic questions about my life, but volunteered nothing beyond what was asked. I was polite, professional, and completely guarded. As the sun set over the ocean, I stood alone on the deck, watching darkness settle over the water. I heard the door open behind me but didn't turn. "Your photography," my father said, coming to stand beside me. "I saw some of your work online after. I looked you up occasionally." The admission surprised me. "Did you?" He nodded, eyes fixed on the horizon. The Manning estate in Santa Barbara, the Sullivan penthouse renovation. "That was your work?" "Yes." "Impressive," he said, the word clearly costing him something. "Very impressive." Before I could respond, he walked away, leaving me with a complicated emotion I couldn't quite name. Not quite validation, not quite reconciliation, but something unstable and fragile forming in the space between. That night, long after most of the family had gone to bed, I found William sitting alone in the kitchen, nursing a glass of scotch. "Can't sleep?" I asked, opening the refrigerator for bottled water. He shook his head. "Too many thoughts." He gestured toward the chair across from him. "Join me." I hesitated, then sat down. We studied each other in the dim light. My successful older brother looked tired. I realized the confident law partner had worry lines that hadn't been there 10 years ago. "They told everyone you had a breakdown," he said abruptly. "After graduation, said you couldn't handle the pressure of starting your career." I absorbed this information slowly. A breakdown. It was easier than admitting you defied them. William took another sip of scotch. "They told the extended family you were getting treatment that first year. Then, when you didn't come back apologizing, they just stopped talking about you entirely. Made it clear the topic was closed. And you went along with it," I said. Not a question, but a statement. He didn't deny it. At first, I thought they might be right, that you'd struggle and come back. When you didn't. He shrugged, the gesture laden with everything he hadn't done. It was easier to maintain the peace. Easier for whom? For everyone. For the family image. He looked down at his glass. "Dad controls everything. The family finances, the connections, the opportunities. Sophie and I built our lives inside his world. You were the only one brave enough to leave." "It wasn't bravery," I said quietly. "It was survival." William nodded slowly. "I know that now." We sat in silence for a moment. "Why did they really organize this reunion?" I finally asked. "Mom's never been sentimental about anniversaries." William hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "Dad's company is struggling. Has been for years. But it's gotten worse recently. The market crashed. Investments failed. They've been keeping up appearances. But..." He gestured around the kitchen. "This is the first family gathering in 3 years that they haven't hosted at their house. They told everyone it was for the beach experience. But really, they couldn't afford their usual display. And their house? Second mortgage. They might lose it if things don't turn around." I processed this information, trying to reconcile it with the parents I'd known, always financially secure, always certain of their position in the world. "There's more," William continued reluctantly. "Dad's health isn't good. Heart problems. He's been hiding it from everyone except Mom, but he collapsed at the office last month. Is he getting treatment?" Yes, but he's stubborn about following doctor's orders. Won't slow down, won't delegate. Thinks admitting weakness will somehow accelerate the company's decline. The kitchen door swung open, revealing Sophie in an expensive silk robe. Her expression shifted from surprise to weariness when she saw me. "Family secrets without me?" she asked lightly, though her tone had an edge. "Just catching up," William replied. "Want to join?" She hesitated, then took the third chair. For a moment, the three Carter siblings sat in silence, reunited in my kitchen after a decade apart. "Your house is beautiful," Sophie finally said, each word carefully measured. "You've done well for yourself. Thank you." "It must be nice," she continued, a hint of bitterness seeping through. "Having complete freedom. No expectations, no obligations. I built my life from nothing." I responded evenly. "That comes with its own pressures. At least you got to build it your way." She twisted her diamond wedding ring around her finger. "Some of us followed the plan and still ended up unhappy." The raw admission hung in the air between us. "Mark is having an affair," she said flatly. "Has been for years. Dad knows but pretends not to. Mark's father is his biggest investor. The perfect Carter family image must be maintained at all costs." William reached across the table to squeeze her hand. This wasn't news to him. I realized the siblings had maintained their own connection, their own secrets, while I'd been cast out. "Why stay?" I asked. Sophie gave a brittle laugh. "3 kids. A prenup that gives me nothing if I leave, and no career of my own. What would you suggest I do?" Before I could answer, we heard footsteps in the hallway. Margaret Carter appeared in the doorway, her face carefully arranged in the pleasant expression she wore like armor. "A late-night gathering," she observed. "How nice." The siblings' conversation instantly ceased. Even as adults in their 30s, my mother's presence still commanded immediate compliance. Some dynamics never changed. "We were just heading to bed," William said, standing quickly. Sophie followed suit. They slipped past our mother with murmured goodnights, leaving me alone with her. Margaret took William's vacated seat, her posture perfect as always. Up close, I could see the fine lines that hadn't been there 10 years ago, the careful application of expensive skincare products that couldn't quite hide the effects of time and stress. "This is a beautiful home," she said after a moment. "You've established quite a life for yourself." "Yes," I agreed. "I have. Without any help." She smoothed an invisible wrinkle from the tablecloth. "You must be very proud." "I am," I replied. She nodded, eyes fixed on her perfectly manicured hands. "Your father and we had certain expectations, plans for how our children's lives would unfold. I remember. We thought we were protecting you." She looked up finally. "The world can be cruel to dreamers. Emily, we didn't want you to struggle unnecessarily. So instead, you cut me off completely when I didn't comply." She flinched slightly but didn't deny it. "We thought you would come back, that you would realize we were right. And when I didn't?" "Pride," she said simply. "On both sides." "Perhaps." We sat in silence, 10 years of absence stretching between us like a vast uncharted territory. "William says Dad is ill," I finally said. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, then resignation. "His heart. He won't slow down, won't listen to doctors. Always been his own worst enemy." For the first time, I heard genuine fear in my mother's voice. Beneath the perfect exterior, she was terrified of losing him. "And the business troubles?" She straightened, her mask slipping back into place. "William has always been overdramatic. Edward has everything under control, but she wouldn't meet my eyes, and I knew William had told the truth. My parents, who had always seemed invincible, were faltering. The empire they had built, the one they had expected me to join, was crumbling around them. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt a complicated mix of emotions I couldn't quite untangle: sympathy, lingering hurt, and the strange realization that these people who had loomed so large in my psyche were just humans after all, flawed, frightened, and facing their own reckonings. I didn't sleep that night. As dawn broke over the ocean, I wrapped myself in a blanket and sat on the private stretch of beach, watching the light change from gray to pink to gold. The confrontation I'd both dreaded and anticipated for a decade had finally happened, but nothing felt resolved. Instead, I felt hollowed out, as if the anger that had partly fueled my success had been spent, leaving uncertainty in its wake. The sound of footsteps on sand made me turn. My father approached, looking older in the harsh morning light than he had in the filtered glow of the house. He wore casual clothes, khakis, and a sweater, so unlike the formal attire I remembered from childhood. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the sand beside me. I nodded, and he lowered himself carefully, his movements betraying physical discomfort he'd tried to hide. For several minutes, we watched the waves in silence. "Your mother told me about your conversation," he finally said. "I assumed she would. She didn't tell me everything," he continued, "but enough." He dug his fingers into the sand beside him. "I've never been good at admitting mistakes, Emily." I remained silent, waiting. "When you left," he paused, seeming to gather himself. "When we drove you away, I was certain you would fail, that you would come back within months, humbled and ready to accept our guidance. I nearly did fail," I admitted. "That first year was brutal, but you didn't." There was something in his voice I'd never heard before, a reluctant respect. "You built something impressive entirely on your own." "I had help," I said, thinking of Nathan, of Clara, just not from my family. He absorbed this like a physical blow, shoulders hunching slightly. "I looked up your company," he said. "Coastal Vision Photography. Very impressive client list. Award-winning work." I glanced at him, surprised. "You researched me? Periodically? Over the years?" He didn't meet my eyes. "Never contacted you. Just checked." The revelation stunned me, that he had silently tracked my career while maintaining the pretense that I didn't exist. "Why?" He shrugged, the gesture incongruously casual from such a formal man. "You're my daughter." The simple statement hung between us, containing both the connection he had never fully severed and the support he had completely withdrawn. "Your company seems quite successful," he continued. "The kind of success I would have bragged about if I'd achieved it in a field you approved of." He nodded, acknowledging the truth of this. "I was wrong about many things, Emily. Photography was clearly the right path for you." He hesitated. "I wanted security for you. Stability. I never imagined you could find that through your passion." We watched a seagull dive into the water and emerge with a small fish. "The irony is," he continued quietly, "you've achieved more stability following your own path than Sophie has following ours." I processed this acknowledgement, perhaps the closest thing to an apology I would ever receive from Edward Carter. "I'm not coming back," I said finally. "Not to the family fold, not to the dynamic we had before." "I know." He nodded slowly. "But perhaps we could know each other again? On different terms." Before I could respond, a small figure appeared further down the beach. Lily, walking alone in the early morning light, camera in hand. She spotted us and waved, then continued her solitary exploration, stopping occasionally to photograph something that caught her eye. "She reminds me of you," my father said, watching her, always seeing things others miss. I followed his gaze, recognizing myself in her careful focus, her absorption in capturing the world through her lens. "She's talented," I said. "Shows real promise. Her parents want her to study business, the Carter family tradition." He glanced at me. "And what do you think she should do?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I think," he said slowly, "that I've lived long enough to see what happens when you force someone to abandon their passion, and what happens when you don't." The conversation lingered with me throughout the day as I moved through my regular routine, answering emails, reviewing client photos, consulting with my team via video call. My family maintained a respectful distance, using the common areas of the house but not intruding on my workspace. That evening, I called a family meeting in the living room. They gathered uncertainly: parents, siblings, extended family, eyeing me with varying degrees of wariness and curiosity. "I want to clarify a few things," I began. "This reunion has been unexpected for all of us. But now that we're here, I think we need to establish how we move forward." My mother straightened in her seat, preparing for negotiation as she would in any business setting. "What did you have in mind?" "I'm not looking for a full reconciliation," I said honestly. "Too much has happened. Too much time has passed for us to simply pick up where we left off. But I'm open to building something new, something healthier." "Define healthier," my father said, his lawyer's precision asserting itself. "Mutual respect," I replied. "Acknowledgement of our different paths. No more erasing or pretending. If we're going to have any relationship at all, it needs to be based on who we actually are, not who you wanted me to be." Sophie shifted uncomfortably. "So we just forget the past 10 years happened? Pretend everything's fine now?" "No," I said firmly. "We acknowledge the estrangement. We acknowledge that all of us, myself included, made choices that led to this moment. And we decide, individually, what kind of relationship we want going forward." "And if some of us don't want a relationship?" Sophie challenged. I met her gaze steadily. "That's a valid choice. I'm not asking anyone to fake affection or connection they don't feel." My mother cleared her throat. "What exactly are you proposing, Emily? Small steps?" I said. "Holiday phone calls? Occasional emails? Maybe dinner when I'm in the city. Nothing forced or obligatory. Just open doors instead of walls." William nodded slowly. "I'd like that," he said quietly. My father was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read, something between admiration and regret. "You've become quite the negotiator," he observed. "I learned from the best," I replied, "even if I applied those lessons differently than you intended." A small smile touched his mouth, perhaps the first genuine one I'd seen from him in over a decade. "Your terms are reasonable," he said finally. "I accept them." My mother hesitated, then nodded her agreement. Sophie remained silent, her expression guarded, but she didn't object outright. "There's one more thing," I added. "Lily has a remarkable eye for photography. I'd like to mentor her if she's interested. Help her develop her talent." Catherine, Lily's mother, looked startled. "She's supposed to focus on her college prep courses. She can do both," I said. I did. The meeting dispersed soon after, the family breaking into smaller groups, processing this new reality in their own ways. I found Lily on the deck, still reviewing photos on her camera. "How would you like to learn more about professional photography?" I asked, sitting beside her. Her face lit up. Seriously? You'd teach me? If your parents agree, we could start with some basics this week, then set up regular lessons when you visit Beverly Hills. They'll say I need to focus on school, she said, her enthusiasm dimming. Let me worry about that, I replied. Sometimes adults need to be reminded that passion and practicality can coexist. She studied me carefully. Is that what happened with you and your parents? They didn't think photography was practical. Something like that. But I did it anyway. She nodded, absorbing this. And now you're super successful. And they're staying in your amazing beach house. I laughed despite myself. Life has a way of taking unexpected turns. Later that night, I found myself alone with my mother in the kitchen. She was making tea, her movements precise and familiar. Your father and I have been discussing your offer, she said, without preamble, about rebuilding a relationship. She handed me a cup of tea prepared exactly as I'd always taken it, with a touch of honey and no milk. The fact that she remembered this small detail after 10 years struck me unexpectedly. It won't be easy, she said. There's been too much distance. I know, I replied, but I'd like to try. She met my eyes directly. You were right to leave, Emily. I didn't see it then, but I do now. You would have withered if you'd stayed. Coming from Margaret Carter, this was as close to an apology as I was likely to get. I accepted it for what it was. Not complete atonement, but a beginning. Thank you, I said simply. She nodded once, then left me alone with my tea and thoughts, the weight of the past slightly lighter than it had been before. The remaining days of the family reunion passed in a strange new normal. We weren't suddenly a happy, cohesive family, but neither were we locked in the frozen silence of the past decade. We existed in an in-between state, cautious, occasionally awkward, but gradually finding ways to interact that acknowledged both our shared history and our separate paths. On their final morning, I stood on the driveway as they loaded their cars. The goodbyes were as varied as our newly established boundaries. William hugged me properly, no longer the stiff embrace of our first reunion. I'll call you next week, he said. Maybe we can get dinner when I'm in Beverly Hills for that conference in September. I'd like that, I replied, and meant it. Sophie approached next, her manner still reserved but less hostile. Thank you for your hospitality, she said formally. You're welcome to visit again, I offered. Bring the kids for a weekend sometime. They should know their aunt. Something flickered across her face. Regret, perhaps, for the relationship we might have had. Maybe, she said. Not quite a commitment, but not a rejection either. My mother surprised me with a brief hug, the first physical contact between us since I'd left home. We'll talk soon, she said, her voice containing a question. Yes, I agreed. We will. My father shook my hand, then awkwardly pulled me into a one-armed embrace. I'm proud of what you've built, he said quietly. I should have told you that sooner. The extended family departed in waves, some with warm goodbyes, others with the polite distance of people who remained essentially strangers. Lily was the last to leave, clutching a portfolio of photography basics I'd prepared for her and a business card with my private number. Call me anytime, I told her. About photography or anything else? She hugged me fiercely. I will. And I'll send you my photos every week for feedback. I'm counting on it, I replied. As the last car pulled away, I returned to my empty house, my sanctuary that had been briefly invaded and was now mine again. I expected to feel relief, but instead found myself experiencing a complex mix of emotions: exhaustion from the constant negotiation of boundaries, lingering hurt from old wounds reopened, but also a strange sense of peace. The ghost family that had haunted the edges of my success had been replaced by real people, flawed, complicated, but no longer holding the power they once had over me. In the weeks that followed, I kept my promises. I answered William's calls. I responded to my mother's tentative emails. I provided feedback on Lily's increasingly impressive photographs. I maintained my boundaries when Sophie made passive-aggressive comments about my unconventional lifestyle. 3 months after the reunion, I received an unexpected email from my father. His company was considering a complete rebranding to attract new investors. Would I be interested in handling the photography for their new marketing materials? The compensation offered was substantial. The professional respect even more so. I accepted the project but insisted on my standard contract and creative control. He agreed without negotiation, a sign of how much had changed between us. 6 months later, I decided to host Thanksgiving at the beach house, not from obligation but from choice. I invited my family but also my chosen family, friends who had supported me when blood relations hadn't, colleagues who had become confidants, David, Clara's son, who had initially resented his mother's bequest but had eventually become a friend. Not everyone accepted. Sophie begged off with excuses about prior commitments. Some relatives chose to maintain their distance, but enough came to fill the house with a new kind of energy, not the perfectly orchestrated performances of past Carter family gatherings, but something messier, more authentic, and ultimately more satisfying. As I looked around the table that evening, my father deep in conversation with my business partner, my mother helping Lily adjust camera settings, William playing board games with a mix of nieces, nephews, and friends' children, I realized I had created something I never expected. Not a replacement family, not a perfect reconciliation, but a new configuration of connections based on mutual respect rather than obligation. The beach house, once my escape from family expectations, had become the place where I could redefine family on my own terms. Later that night, I walked alone on the beach, watching the November moonlight on the water. 10 years ago, I had left home with nothing but determination and a camera. The journey from that moment to this one hadn't been easy, but it had been mine. Every struggle, every triumph, every lesson learned. True family, I had discovered, wasn't defined by unconditional acceptance but by mutual respect. It wasn't about erasing differences but honoring them. Sometimes, the hardest boundaries to set were the ones that ultimately allowed genuine connection to grow. I hadn't forgiven everything. Some wounds would always leave scars, but I had found something more valuable than perfect reconciliation: the knowledge that I could build a life of meaning and success on my own terms, and the confidence to welcome people into that life without surrendering my hard-won independence. What about you? Have you ever had to rebuild a relationship on new terms after a painful break? Would you have opened your door to family members who had cut you off? Drop a comment below sharing your experience or what you would have done in my situation. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that creating healthy boundaries isn't selfish. It's essential for genuine connection. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, sometimes the family we build is more important than the family we're born into.